Hi class, let's keep talking about the flow of lymph. Ooh, I think I might be an extra slide forward here. Let's back up a slide. Here we go. This is the slide I meant to start on. So let's talk about how lymphatic fluids can move throughout the body. So as we look at lymphatic fluids, we need to really emphasize here that it flows much slower than the blood does, particularly the venous blood. As we look at the venous blood is going to have arterial blood pressure pushing it back towards the heart. Our lymphatic fluid doesn't have that arterial pressure, so it doesn't have that pump, the heart pushing the lymphatic fluid back to the heart. So it's going to be similar in the mechanisms of flow, but it's just going to be slower. When I say similar to the mechanisms, I mean that we're going to have skeletal muscle pumps helping to contract and push the lymphatic fluid through the one-way valve. As we have stretching of the lymphatic vessels, the stretching of the lymphatic vessels as we move our bodies and activate those skeletal muscle pumps are also going to cause rhythmic contractions of the smooth muscle that makes up the walls of our lymphatic vessels. So as we look at lymphatic fluid, it flows at very low pressure back towards the heart. Now, something that really aids with that flow of the fluid is that skeletal muscle pump, which I had mentioned. The skeletal muscle pump is a key player in moving lymphatic fluid back towards the heart. Our lymphatic vessels have one-way valves present in them, just like our veins do. So lymphatic fluid can move one direction towards the subclavian veins, the left-right subclavian veins, because of those valves. The thoracic pump also aids with the movement of lymphatic fluid. So when we inhale, our thoracic cavity increases in volume. We have a lower pressure in the cavity, and that draws more lymphatic fluid towards the subclavian the subclavian veins. The pulsation of the arteries is going to push against the outside of our lymphatic vessels, and that's going to cause lymphatic fluid to help move through the lymphatic vessels. As we have the fluid get closer to the subclavian veins, we have, I believe it's called the Bernoulli effect, as we have that rapidly flowing blood, relatively speaking, rapidly flowing blood within the subclavian veins, it sucks or it draws a little bit of lymphatic fluid with it. And then a key factor here is exercise. Moving your body is going to really maximize the rate of the flow of lymphatic fluids. Now, as we look at the cells within our lymphatic system, we have a lot of lymphocytes that are key players here. As we look at the lymphocyte subtypes, they are T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, and natural killer cells. And I have to admit, natural killer cells are probably one of my favorite cell types of the lymphatic immune system. These natural killer cells are a special kind of lymphocyte, the NK cells, that are going to really kind of just be, you know, I'm going to call them the MVP of the immune system. They do lots of different things, lots of really cool things. They help to destroy cells that are infected with viruses. They help to destroy bacteria, human cells, I should say, that are destroyed, they help to destroy human cells infected with viruses. They help to destroy bacterial cells that may be in our body. And they help monitor tissue transplants to make sure that the tissues that are in our body belong in our body. This natural killer cell is one of the key cell types that is responsible for transplant rejection or donor rejection of tissue transplants. And natural killer cells also will destroy human cells that are cancerous. So they help to destroy cancers within our bodies. As we look at the T cells, the T lymphocytes mature in the thymus, T for thymus, T for T lymphocyte. And when we look at the B lymphocytes or the B cells, I want you to think red bone marrow, bone with a B, red bone marrow, B lymphocytes. Even though the B is actually for a different structure found within the knee of a chicken. But it's just a nice coincidence that B lymphocytes also in human beings come from red bone marrow. And these T lymphocytes, or excuse me, the B lymphocytes, when they're activated, are going to differentiate into plasma cells in addition to B memory cells. And these plasma cells in particular that the B lymphocytes activate into are going to be antibody-making cells. These are the cell types in our bodies that make the antibodies. As we look at macrophages, macro means big, phage means to eat. These are one of the largest cell types of our lymphatic immune system. These are very phagocytotically active cells, and they're going to move rapidly through the connective tissues of our bodies. Macrophages develop from the monocyte, which is the largest of the 5 kinds of leukocytes we talked about in the previous unit. As these macrophages move throughout the cells and connective tissues of our bodies, they are going to phagocytize bacteria, neutrophils, which have self-destructed. If we have tissue debris in our bodies, those macrophages will remove it, or any other foreign matter can be processed by the macrophages. As the macrophage is processing foreign matter in our body, maybe bacteria or tissue debris, it'll take bits and pieces of that foreign matter, called antigenic fragments, put it on the surface of its cell membrane, and then display those antigenic fragments to a kind of T lymphocyte to alert the immune system of anything that may be in there that potentially is a problem. Because these macrophages display antigenic fragments or bits and pieces of the bacteria and viruses that it comes in contact with, these macrophages are referred to as a kind of APC, antigen presenting cell. We also have in our body dendritic cells. And as we look at dendritic cells, their namesake really tells you what they look like. When we think of a dendrite, I want you to think of branching. Dendritic cells have many branching appendages. And these dendritic cells are a special kind of antigen-presenting cell that moves around within the epidermis of our skin and the mucous membranes and other lymphatic organs of our bodies. So as we look at the dendritic cells, these dendritic cells you can think of them as an immune cell or a lymphocyte, or excuse me, a leukocyte of the skin or epidermis. And they help to alert us if our immune system, if any pathogens are penetrating the surface of our body, are breaching our outer defenses. We also have reticular cells. Reticular cells are stationary cells. You can see some in this photomicrograph right here on the lower right-hand side of the screen. These stationary reticular cells are going to help make up the stroma, or the mesh-like network of lymphatic organs. And these lymphatic organs, here we see a picture of a photomicrograph of a lymph node in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. These reticular cells are going to help with the filtering process of these lymphatic organs, as these organs filter lymphatic fluids. We also have lymphoid tissues or lymphatic tissues in our bodies. These lymphatic tissues are going to have high concentrations of lymphocytes. So if there's lots of lymphocytes, it's a lymphatic tissue. We typically find these lymphocytes concentrated in mucous membranes of various organs and other miscellaneous organs as well, such as the spleen or the lymph nodes or the thymus. And as we look at these lymphatic tissues, the simplest ones, or the simplest form of these lymphatic tissues, just have lymphocytes scattered throughout instead of being clustered throughout. And we have diffuse lymphatic tissue, the simplest kind of lymphatic tissue, all throughout our bodies. But it's going to primarily be focused on the tubes that go through our bodies, the passageways that open to the exterior. So think digestive tract, think respiratory tract, urinary and reproductive tract. This is where we're going to have a lot of diffuse lymphatic tissue. Typically, it's going to be associated with some kind of a mucous membrane. And these mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues or lymphatic tissues are referred to as MALTs. We also are going to have lymph nodes or lymphatic nodules, sometimes referred to as lymphatic follicles. And instead of having diffusely scattered lymphocytes, we're going to have a dense mass, an aggregation of lymphocytes in addition to macrophages. And these tend to congregate in response to pathogens being present. And because pathogens are preferentially filtered out of lymphatic fluid within our lymph nodes, we're going to have lots of lymphocytes and macrophages within our lymph nodes. Our tonsils and our appendix also has high concentrations of lymphocytes and monocytes, because these particular structures are going to constantly be exposed to high concentrations of pathogens. As we look at these aggregated lymphatic nodules, we need to emphasize that we also have a lot of them in the ileum. The ileum is the very last portion of the small intestine, right before the large intestine, where we have feces. And because not all, but just a little tiny bit of feces, and the bacteria associated with that feces flows backwards through the ileocecal valve of the intestinal tract to go from the large intestine into the small intestine. This last portion of the small intestine, the ileum, is going to have lots of lymphatic nodules within them, or MALTs, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues, and also these lymphoid nodules to help combat pathogens that are traveling backwards from the colon. That's all we have for this recording. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the class discussion board or to shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.